We're not going to be able to live in this world if we're not willing to treat one another like precious children of God. The road will only be wide. The rain will never stop falling. You and I woke up Monday morning to news of another mass shooting, the deadliest in recent history by a single gunman, this time in Las Vegas at a country music concert. 58 people died, actually I think it's 59 this morning, plus the shooter, and close to 500 people were injured. It's a breath-stealing, incomprehensible number. Our Sophie Hopkins, who has lived just 18 years on this earth, texted me that day and said, "You know what's weird? In my lifetime, the headlines of a shooting being the largest in U.S. history has appeared like 4 times. All I could say was, I'm sorry." And if you're anything like me, you woke your kids up on Monday and pretended you weren't numb or grieving or angry. You woke your kids who greet each day with a wonder and an innocence you prefer to maintain, and you smiled and you made them breakfast and pretended that you weren't worried sick every day about the world that you brought them into. You resisted the urge to apologize to them about the state of the world still flooded and groaning and divided and maybe on the brink of a nuclear war, and you shuttled them off to school praying for their safety. If you're anything like me, you resigned yourself to the inevitability of the next deadliest shooting happening in Sophie's lifetime again soon. If you're anything like me, you held your breath when the Wachusett Regional High School was on lockdown on Wednesday because of a school shooting threat. Zan described it to me last night as we dined at the Harvest Grill. Bomb-sniffing dogs were brought in, she said, and a gun was found in a kid's backpack with detailed threats. The kids aren't sure still if it was a BB gun or a real one. One upside of the lockdown, Zan said, was that she got to miss math. Yesterday, my 7-year-old came into my office and said, "What's a terrorist attack and why do they happen?" God bless all the teachers and administrators keeping our children alive. They are also vulnerable, and God bless all of the parents and grandparents who are trying to answer questions we don't really know the answers to. The world's most precious cargo is contained in those classrooms, in those homes, asking unanswerable questions. The hum of our collective dreams is contained within these walls, and the road will only be wide. The rain will never stop falling. I don't have anything to say this week about gun control or mental health screening or the lack of prayer in schools or any of the rest of the talking points that so many have something to say about. That's all far above my pay grade. But what I do have something to say about is the mass dehumanization of God-imaged people. What takes my breath away is the ability that this man in Las Vegas had, whether you call him a lone wolf or a terrorist, to treat God-imaged human beings like targets in a video game. The fact that a fellow human being can forget that all people have sacred worth is an evil that terrifies me far more than his weaponry does. And it terrifies me because I recognize a tendency to dehumanize everywhere, even in myself. In this age of 24-hour connectivity, we are more isolated in our homes and our carefully cultivated news feeds. We are less likely to know our neighbors, to go outside in our neighborhoods. We are less likely to go to church, to interact with real flesh and blood community, to encounter difference of opinion or culture or religion or ideology. We are less likely to grieve each other's losses in real time. We are less likely to celebrate each other's triumphs, to know one another. It is no coincidence that we are more divided as a nation than we have been since the Civil War. The mass dehumanization of God-imaged people will keep happening as long as we suggest that those we disagree with are less than human. The mass dehumanization of God-imaged people will keep happening as long as we worship idols more than God, whether those idols are politics or material goods or money or weapons or the flag. But God is still here. God is a very present help in times of trouble. God is present in every person we encounter. God is in the midst of the city, it shall not be moved. Love will help it when the morning dawns. The nations are in an uproar, the kingdoms totter. Love utters his voice, and the earth melts. The Lord of love is with us. The God of love is our refuge. So if you're anything like me this week, you felt lucky. You felt lucky that you have a community like this one to grieve with and pray with on a Sunday morning, reminding you that you are not alone. If you're anything like me, you felt lucky. Lucky that you have a community like this one that reminds you to be still and know that love is there as a refuge and a strength. You are not alone. If you're anything like me, you looked for the helpers this week to find God. You found God in the first responders, the police officers and the firefighters who run toward the sound of gunshots rather than away. If you're like me, you found God in the administration of the Wachusett Regional High School and the Holden Police Department, who swiftly locked down the school, kept the students calm and safe, and the parents informed. If you're like me, you found God in the music teacher and principal at the Houghton Elementary School in Sterling, who plan a Peace Pole celebration every year. The kids dress in rainbow colors singing, "I've got peace like a river in my school." If you're like me, you found God in the Sterling fire chief and town administrator who made a difficult, heart-wrenching decision to fire an employee of the department this week. They took a stand for the dignity of each human life that day, as the fire department and police force and EMS in Sterling do every time they walk into a burning building or revive a dying patient in an ambulance. They stand up for human dignity. And if you're anything like me, you found God in the many beautiful stories of simple human heroism in Las Vegas. This is the story that stuck with me. Jordan McEldoon, a 25-year-old from Maple Ridge, British Columbia, died holding the hand of a stranger at the concert. Heather Goose told CNN that she somehow ended up next to McEldoon. Even though she didn't know him, she held his hand during his final minutes. She felt a squeeze from his fingers and then felt his hand go loose. Goose said that she knew there was nothing more to do, yet she stayed with McEldoon for hours. When his phone rang, she answered it, and she learned his name and told the caller that everything was not okay. She relayed the news of his death to his long-term girlfriend and his mother, all the while staying by his side. I didn't want Jordan to not have somebody with him, she told CNN through tears. I didn't want him to just be a no-named body. I knew who he was, and now I had an obligation to make sure that everyone knew who he was. I knew who he was, she said. Jordan died holding Heather's hand, someone who knew his name, who felt obliged to make sure everyone else did too. He died knowing he was not alone. Beloved, we're not going to be able to live in this world if we're not willing to do what she did with one another. So what do we do when we can't hear love's voice over the uproar of the nations, the tottering kingdom, the mountains trembling, the waters roar and foam, the political posturing, the sound of bullets shattering the night sky? What do we do? Be still. Be still and know. There is this funny word that shows up in the Psalms 72 times, including the psalm we read this morning. And usually people skip over it when they are lay reading, like Peter did this morning. That's probably appropriate since no one really knows what this word means. The word is Selah. Have you seen that in the Psalms? Selah. It's usually in italics. Scholars think that it is an ancient musical notation because the Psalms are meant to be sung. They guess that it is a pause or a rest. They think it means maybe that we should pay extra special attention to the verse before and meditate on it, to be still. They think it means to stop and listen. He utters his voice, the earth melts, the Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our refuge, Selah. Stop and listen. Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. Stop and listen. His ear fills up with breathing. He hears the hum of a boy's dream deep inside him. Selah. Stop and listen. I keep imagining what the world would be like if we truly stopped and listened to one another and to our children for God's voice, for God's dream deep inside of each of us. Our Kristen Turner, who isn't here today but usually sits right there, who is a history teacher that I am so glad is teaching our children, writes this about the recent NFL controversy last week. She writes, "Today there are many groups looking for empathy and understanding. Some of those groups have vastly differing political beliefs and values, but I would argue that their desire to be heard and understood is a commonality that is greater than their differences. Today, if you struggle to understand why people kneel, ask to understand. If you struggle to understand why people are hurt by those who are kneeling, ask to understand. Listen for understanding, not for outrage or to respond. Just listen," she says. If someone tells you they are hurt by something, don't tell them that they're not. Instead, just listen. Selah. Stop and listen. Maybe this is how we transform this world. Maybe this is how we withstand the storm. Maybe this is how we protect our children. Maybe this is how we understand something of who God is. Selah, stop and listen. Adrienne Rich writes this: "My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." Beloved, we're not going to be able to live in this world if we're not willing to treat one another as precious children of God, every single other. The road will only be wide. The rain will never stop falling. So stop and listen. Let our hearts be moved by all we cannot save, by all that has been destroyed, and then let us build a community of hope and love on this earth. I cast my lot with all of you who age after age, perversely and with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. Selah and Amen.